The Laocoön Complex by J.C. Furnas. It was on January 26, 1937, that John Howard Sims first found a snake in his bath. Half lying, half sitting in the tub, he was considering whether he would turn off the warm water when it reached his armpits or wait till it was up to his neck, as he balanced the exertion of lifting his feet to the faucet against his pleasure in the creeping warmth of the rising water. Something wriggled beneath his right hip. Wriggled convulsively and indignantly, like a fish on the end of a line. Sims reared himself clear and snatched behind him. His clawing fingers closed on something tubular and vigorous. He leaped from the tub and found himself dripping and trembling and gripping a writhing green snake in his right hand. It never occurred to him to be incredulous about it. The snake was as solid and corporeal as the hand that held it. Moving with a gasping speed, he hurled the snake back into the tub and stood glaring at it, unconsciously wringing and wiping his hand. His frantic haste had spattered water over the whole room. Stunned or dead, the snake floated passively on the surface of the water, its weary length peacefully undulated on the small waves and tidal sloshings in the tub. Sims felt no desire to probe into the matter of where it had come from. He merely stood and stared, while his trembling slowly left him, and although he knew there was no one else in the apartment, something moved him to close the bathroom door with a bang. Presently it became evident that the snake was still alive. Its undulations began to run counter to those of the water until it was swimming lazily, even lifting its head an inch or so above the surface. Sims was relieved to see that it had survived rough treatment. Yet he did want to get rid of it. He could use the fire tongs. But the snake was a good 4 feet long and might coil up and touch his hands. Very possibly it was poisonous, and he could not endure the notion of again coming into contact with that writhing vigor. Perhaps he could wash it down the drain, as if it were so much dirt. Gingerly he opened the outlet that was relieved again that the water level began visibly to sink. Seemingly unconscious of any change, the snake floated serenely until its belly was aground. Then, moving its head cautiously from side to side, it crawled through the soapy scum to the outlet. Too late, Sims realized that its flat head and plump middle were much too large to go through the holes in the metal cap over the drain. But the snake, investigating the situation with a grave air of businesslike concern, astounded him by sticking its head into the central hole, which was most certainly too small, and crawling deliberately through inch by inch. When about 6 inches of tail was left, it seemed to encounter difficulties farther down. Having resisted an impulse to drag it out again, Sims shortly had the satisfaction of seeing the tail wiggle in triumph and disappear. He ran to his kitchenette and boiled several panfuls of water, which he poured down the drain with a vague faith in boiling water for getting rid of any sort of hostile pests from bacteria up. Then he rubbed himself down and dressed and went out for his breakfast, concerned because he was going to be half an hour late at the office. He was not on sociable enough terms with any of his associates at the office to tell them about his strange morning. He was tempted to confide in the stenographer who took his dictation, but reflected in time that such a story going the rounds might gain him a reputation for eccentricity. The obscure pride which he sometimes felt in being the wheel-horse with the correspondence department had often served him as counterweight in just this fashion. After work and his solitary dinner, however, he found himself unwilling to spend his customary quiet evening with the newspaper. Instead, he went to a movie. Moreover, he neglected to wash or brush his teeth before going to bed because he did not care to enter the bathroom. But in the morning he had to shave, and he told himself, while lathering his face, that it was childish and unhygienic to forswear bathing because of a strange accident. It was a bright morning. A streak of sunshine across the tub cheerfully illuminated the running water. No sign of a snake, nothing out of the way except a stray scrap of paper, which he carefully removed before getting in. As he lay back gratefully in the warm water, he realized that he was completely relaxed for the first time in 24 hours. Almost in that instant he felt the same electric wriggling under his hip. This time he leaped from the water without investigating, scarcely frightened at all, but feeling abused because he could not bathe in peace. It was outrageous that 4 feet of anomalous reptile should again be floating in his bath With its head daintily raised above the water, in a passion of pettish anger, he opened the drain and witnessed the same scene, the subsiding water, the snake's good-natured acceptance of the situation, and the horrid unreasonableness of its disappearing into a hole much too small for its girth. A crafty longing for revenge came over him. With complete disregard for office hours, he filled the tub again, got in, lay back, and got out in still hotter anger, as the now familiar sign that the visitor had returned. He had carefully watched the outlet, and was certain that it had not crawled back. Yet, to all appearances, it was the same snake. He got the fire tongs and seized its head with the purpose of holding it under the water until it drowned, but its convulsive thrashings under such treatment made him ill. There was unendurable terror in the drops of water which showered on his face and shoulders as he leaned over to the work. He might have persevered, however, if it had not occurred to him that perhaps snakes could not be drowned. It would be better to kill it instantaneously. He had long owned a revolver, purchased in a spiritual preoccupation against robbery. As he took it from its place in the bureau drawer, under his socks, he wondered if the superannuated cartridges would fire. They still looked grim and deadly. He took careful aim with the edge of the tub for the rest, and shot the snake's head off cleanly. The noise of the report in the narrow bathroom deafened him, and he was even more sharply aware of the snake's convulsive thrashings. Such a blast should have alarmed everyone in the house, but there were no poundings on the door, no footsteps on the stairs. He waited for only a few minutes before going back to the tub and observing with satisfaction that the snake, its head mangled and hanging, was floating on the water, quite dead. His mind was made up. With the aid of the tongs, he coiled the snake neatly into a hat box, dressed, and went out with the box under his arm. This matter was going to be looked into. Where to go and what to do puzzled him until he remembered that doctors know everything. At the hospital, they wrote a great deal of pointless information about him on a form, and let him get as far as the word snakes before calling 2 orderlies. Sims was annoyed to see that alcoholics was written on the door of the office to which they took him, with elaborate precaution. The doctor, looking inquisitively at the hat box, also let him speak a good deal without interruption. When Sims reached the second appearance of the snake, however, he raised his hand. "How many drinks do you usually have in a day?" he asked, with a weary suggestion of routine in his voice. "I don't drink at all," Sims answered shortly, outraged by this confirmation of the sign on the door. "Now come," said the doctor. "I can't waste my time on you if you won't be frank." "I don't just see snakes," said Sims, reflecting that after all the doctor was well justified in being skeptical. "I feel 'em. Kill 'em." He opened the hat box and dumped the snake, which he still could not bear to touch, on the doctor's desk. Water and blood oozed from its mangled head on the green blotter. The doctor stared back in amazement. "I shot that one this morning," said Sims, almost in apology. The doctor picked up a paper cutter and stirred the body. Then, becoming bolder, he prodded it and held it up, limp and resigned, like a cat lifted by the middle. "It's real," he said indignantly. "They're all real," answered Sims, going on with the story of the morning's battle. The doctor listened in reflective silence, and then began to ask questions about his patient's private life. Where did he work? How long had he been there? Was he generally in good health? And so forth. Then, politely asking permission beforehand, he phoned Sims's office and checked up on the story. "This isn't my line," the doctor finally said, after pondering